Continuing with our advisory council updates. Next up is an update on our innovation and technology advisory council, or ITAC. We love to give short names to all these councils. And please welcome Jarnail Church, who is going to be, I believe, is going to be joining us through the virtual forum, and Phil Green, who is going to be joining us here in person. That's what I think. Yep. He's coming. Okay, good. Okay, welcome Phil, and welcome Jarnail.
And I think we're going to start with Jarnail as a video that he's produced. I believe we're starting with that, correct?
Welcome to the ITAC session. I'm Jarnail Church, and along with my fellow members of the Council, we're delighted to present an outline of the project on voice preservation we have started to work on. The following slides will provide an overview of the thinking that we've done to date. I'll seek to outline our goals, the objectives for the work, and then also use the session to start to flesh out the details on how we intend to design and deliver the project in the upcoming year. So why does voice preservation matter? Well, fundamentally, it's the vehicle, the channel through which personal identity and expression is most keenly felt. We know that there are so many different dimensions to voice, whether it's to do with dialects, the incorporation of different languages, level of literacy and suitability that a person may have in order to be able to preserve their voice, the importance of training in order to provide better preservation and articulation as well, and some of the techniques that will help to convey that, particularly those taught by speech and language therapists and so on. But going back to that personal identity and expression again, it's the way, the means through which we connect with family and friends. And as part of preservation, important to involve them in that process of choosing perhaps key phrases, developing communication cues, and so on. Now, when you look at the current state of voice banking and message banking, we know that, for example, voice banking generally consists of about 50 predefined phrases, and they're used to generate a synthetic voice which reads out what a person is typing. And of course, based on the technology that's being used, some systems will accommodate up to a few hundred phrases, but it does lack emotion and the tone of a natural human voice. Contrast that with message banking, which is comprised of a catalogue of pre-recorded phrases in the user's language, in the user's voice, so it's a little bit more personalized, it's natural, it helps convey some of that emotion, some of that feeling, and hence in this way supports expression of the same phrase, allowing a person greater control over how they wish to sound. And the technique of double dipping, where banked messages are used as input into the creation of the synthetic voice. This, of course, makes it a lot more efficient, a lot more effective. And we also know that voice banking by proxy, the use of a similar sounding voice to the person, where a person may have lost their voice already, is also used as well. Now, when we started to think about the voice preservation project, one of the things that we were particularly keen to look at was how can we use technology, particularly within the Alliance and the relationships and collaborations and the reputation the Alliance has built up over many years, and seek to deliver a global system that in particular would serve those regions of the world which have to a large extent not been given the opportunity. And the way that we wanted to do this is to first of all establish an understanding of the current state across the world, what that is in terms of the service, the availability, with the goal then of designing and developing a sustainable foundation for which everybody, regardless of where they are in the world, who would be able to benefit from it, would then have access to the technology. And the key dimensions of the approach that we're taking is, of course, based first and foremost on the person, ensuring that the needs of each individual are accommodated to provide the best impact on the quality of their life, and of course the knock-on effect on family and friends as well. From a technology point of view, the intent was and is to conduct a landscape analysis of current solutions, but also look at the costs, the requirements, the coverage, and where that gap is and how we can fill that gap through the technology, the collaboration, the partnerships that are available to us. And one of the things that we also wanted to do from a business point of view is to make sure that not only do we engage with relevant stakeholders, and there's a pretty broad group, and I'll come to those in a little bit later on, but through identifying their perspectives, think about how we can develop a framework that not only delivers impact at scale, but is also sensitive to the value and the benefits, for example, the stakeholders, different technology companies, etc., seek to provide as well. In the work that we've done to date, we've started off by, first of all, mapping the journey from an end-to-end customer experience point of view. And the way that we've done it across a number of different dimensions is to map it in terms of what the current experience is and how we can use technology to make it better than what people currently experience and what they go through. And the key areas that we're focused on are the inflection points, the point at which a person starts to engage with a professional, the point at which they start to see the benefits and engage with technology. And after they've been using it for a while, that desire, that intent to give something back to the community. And the way that we've represented it in this journey map is to take those key inflection points, overlay them across a traditional or typical journey that a person may experience, start to detail what that current experience is, and then look at how it differs between, for example, North America, Europe, Japan, and Australasia, where we know that access and provision is much better than the rest of the world, where in South America, in Africa, and in many parts of Asia. So when you look at that entire customer journey, the first part of dealing with the confirmation of the diagnosis, we know is incredibly difficult and challenging, both emotionally and mentally. And as that person then starts to engage with professionals, clinicians, specialists, people in the community, and they start to learn a little bit more about ALS and MND, we know that that access to information gives that sense of control, that sense of empowerment, that sense of, okay, so I know what this is. And by talking with professionals, by knowing that there are people who will be with you to guide you through this journey, does provide a level of reassurance. And together, once you've then started to look at what's out there, look at what's available to you, where you are, what you may be entitled to or may have access to, once again, based on where you are and the policies and regulations governing the region or governing the country. The very activity associated with researching solutions, once again, starts to give you a sense of the impact on your life and what it will mean for you. And of course, we know that this is a period where it's fluctuating. There are ups and there are downs. And then once you start to engage with the technology itself, getting hands-on with voice banking and message banking technologies, and starting to understand how to not only use them, but the impact it'll have. We know that at this point, this is where the biggest version starts to occur between North America, depicted in the pink line here, and the rest of the world, depicted in the shaded line. And when we look at this throughout the entire experience, we know that the experience for the rest of the world pretty much stays in the negative, whereas the experience in North America, Europe, Japan, and Australasia does go above the neutral and does go into a positive area where once a person has started to use the technology, they've incorporated it into their lives, and they're able to interact meaningfully, albeit with very severe constraints. But within those constraints, interact meaningfully and connect with family and friends and the things, activities, tasks that are important to them in their life. And then as that journey continues, and there is that desire to give something back to that community. And here, one of the things that we're hoping to do is to look at how we can tap into that desire to contribute, to give something back, but then also the insights that come from reflecting and sharing your experience and how that in turn can help others further on down the line. Now, from these broader considerations, what we started to do from an experience, from a technology, and from a business perspective is to detail them out in a little bit more detail. Starting to think about the cost and the benefit analysis, starting to think about the value exchange between the different stakeholders and how it will benefit them in terms of what they currently do, and how we can make this voice preservation an attractive proposition so that we can accomplish our goal of delivering this at scale, while at the same time helping them identify the opportunity that they will benefit from by participating and contributing in a meaningful way. We know that there are regulatory considerations that we have to take into account. We know that from a scalability point of view, there's a whole range of different technologies that we can use. And we also know that by setting ourselves this really challenging objective of making it available everywhere around the world, that some of the constraints that do exist in Asia, Africa, South America, for example, can also be an opportunity to innovate, to come up with new ideas, new solutions, and the role that technology can play in that. We've seen that happen time and time again. And once again, we're keen to present that from that perspective and see what it will open up for innovation. The key stakeholders that we intend to engage with, of course, will be around PALS and the advocacy groups there. We intend to totally leverage the Alliance and the member associations from around the world. I've mentioned before the importance of clinicians and medical professionals, and of course, the role that government has to play in this and can continue to evolve in the future as well. We look at the current initiatives. We know that perhaps the most significant one that was recently announced is the Speech Accessibility Project, and the technology partners contributing to that do have the opportunity by coming together to help us deliver this at scale. We're not taking that for granted, but we're hoping that by positioning it as an opportunity, the incentive and the motivation to contribute based on the value that they will get in return will be a key motivator for them as well. Some of the current work that Emily Corman from Team Gleason has done, I've just outlined in these slides here, looking at some of the existing voice banking technologies that people are using and are available around the world. I mentioned before the importance of making sure that what we come up with is something which is sustainable and viable. And we're thinking in terms of looking at the scope of the ambition within 3 to 5 years. And while that may seem a long time away, we also want to be realistic and certainly intend to spend much of the next year, which I'll come to in a moment, informing ourselves with what's currently out there, starting to get a better understanding of the landscape. We've also started to outline the roles and responsibilities of each of these different member organisations, once again to feed into when we start formally engaging with them, to have a starting point, to have a more meaningful discussion. And on the final slide here, I've outlined the next 12 months and what they will look like. The first few months is really about understanding who the key stakeholders are, how we're going to reach out to them and start collecting this information, and also use this as the time frame in which we'll develop relationships with contributors, organizations in Africa, Asia, South America. And from a technology point of view, start to engage with these organizations right now. And over the next 4 or 5 months, once we start getting information back from the surveys, the questionnaires, the focus groups and interviews, and we start the analysis and start to summarize some of those findings, start to extract what those constraints are and engage with the technology companies, so that at the midpoint, around 6 months, we've started to ideate on some of these potential solutions. And then from there, starting to think about, well, what would a potential working solution that would allow us to engage with the community in a meaningful way, particularly in the underserved parts of the world, what would that look like? And hopefully start to, in the subsequent months, actually pilot something. So I hope in this session, through the overview that I've been able to provide, it gives you a sense of what our current thinking is, the direction in which we hope to be able to take this work, and we'll now open it up for questions. Thank you.
So now I believe Jornel is going to join us virtually for the Q&A, and we also have Phil here for any of your questions. We have one at the bottom over there.
Some people living with Alzheimer's couldn't do voice banking. Is there any way to get voice banking with their own voices? Maybe with old voice messages?
I believe that is a question for Jornel.
Yeah, I think I may have missed the first part of it, but based on what I did here, then I think absolutely the ability to take existing voice messages absolutely gives us, I think, data raw material that can be worked with. Of course, what's really important is to make sure that you've got a sufficient range of words and expression within that content, because that ultimately will lead to a more realistic outcome. But certainly, I think one of the things that we'll be looking at is if there are existing data sources or little sort of collections, whether they're from audio recordings, telephone messages, videos, that people are able to utilize for this, then yeah, absolutely. How can we incorporate them with maybe more formal ways of capturing voice?
I think there's a little more work involved with that scenario, but it's definitely doable. I do know that the trend to train the voice models is gone from a requirement of upwards of 500 phrases down to as low now as 50. So getting quality existing recordings, I think, is the biggest challenge in that scenario. And the platforms that exist today do allow you to upload files, and some do require you to have transcripts of those audio files, but it's something that that our community needs, because I have too many friends who have progressed too quickly and did not capture their voice, did not preserve their voice. And we need to have solutions for them as well.
Question here.
I want to add to it. There is a company in India who can voice clone with your recorded voice. So I did on my own recording, and they actually cloned my voice with tone. So there is a company, but they have not kind of explored the air speed here. Even with my slurred speed, they were able to clone. So we are trying to convince the company to enter into the ALS field. So hopefully in the near future, we will be there.
Can you connect us with that company?
Yes,
Okay.
I can.
And that seems to be the case with a lot of existing technologies and companies. They have really good synthetic voice solutions. ALS MND is not on their radar. And they are working through challenges to get through what currently is an enterprise solution for them, to offer it as an affordable solution for what we need.
There's an online question, please.
Yes, I believe we barely have time for one more question. Yes.
Thank you. It is from Roderick, a person with ALS, and he said, "Great news. What format will the recordings take place in, please?"
I don't know if Janelle heard that.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure whether it was referring to the previous question about the voice cloning technology they were using, or whether this was a more general question. Can we
I'm
clarify
sorry,
that?
it's not specific. I'm going to assume it was about the cloning, because we were talking about it as it came in.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Do you want to address that, or do you want, I mean, today, I have my files from Acapella, and those are in just standard WAV files. And I think part of what our goal is to develop some sort of global standard in how these companies are accepting these voice files, so that as we try to preserve them, it's all following a necessary structure that will give us our best synthetic voices.
I think ITAC's liaison Nick has a question.
Hi everyone. Well, it was more a comment really than a question, just to finish off really. So I'm the board liaison for the ITAC group, and I'm very passionate about using technology to improve the quality of life for people living with MND and ALS. So it was just a reflection really, just to say thank you, because when I think about when we started this journey 3 years ago, thinking about how the ITAC could form and could create a platform to talk about technology globally, we've come a long way, and it's just amazing to see. So it was just a thank you really to everybody that's involved in this space. We saw through the Gleason Foundation what they're doing. We're doing a lot of work in the UK, and I think there's a real role for not duplicating effort globally, but really importantly to get technology into the hands of people that need it. And I think that's where we can add real value. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jarnail. Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. So